The events of a week ago are still fresh in my mind. After work that day, Lin Wanqing suddenly found me and said she had something to ask. Who would have thought that this small request would cause such a huge shift in our life trajectory? In fact, before this, my impression of Lin Wanqing was limited to the workplace. At every departmental meeting, she always sat in the first row and carefully recorded every detail. At every project report, her speech was always the most organized. At every group building activity, she always arranged her work early and showed up on time. She is like a machine that never stops, devoting all her time and energy to her work. I used to think that she was the kind of person with a cold personality, until one time, I inadvertently found her secretly watering a pot of dying greenery in the pantry. At that time, her eyes were soft and the corner of her mouth had a faint smile, which was different from her usual self. It was from then on that I began to have a hint of curiosity about this seemingly powerful girl. As the sales elite of the marketing department, Lin Wanqing's performance was always far ahead. There were all kinds of rumors about her circulating in the company. Some said she was unsympathetic, some said she was too strong, but I knew that these were just shells for her to protect herself. This day at noon, we met in the fast food restaurant near the company. Usually always a suit, she was wearing a plain white shirt, sitting quietly in the corner eating a boxed lunch. Seeing me, she froze for a moment, then gave a slightly embarrassed smile. "I didn't expect to meet you here," she said, gesturing for me to take the seat across from her. "I come here often for dinner." I smiled. "It's you, aren't you usually out talking to clients?" She looked down and stirred the rice in her lunchbox and said softly, "Sometimes I want to be quiet." It was during that meal that she mentioned things at home. It turned out that she was almost 30 and her family was very anxious about her marriage. Her mom, in particular, brought up the subject every time they video called. "They think I put all my energy into my work and don't think about my personal life at all." She smiled bitterly and said, "I've actually thought about getting into a relationship, but I always felt that the time wasn't right." While listening to her say this, I saw Lin Wanqing's vulnerable side for the first time. In everyone's eyes, she was the strong woman who could do anything, but in fact, she also felt pressure and confusion. It was also after that day that she began to appear in my line of sight more frequently. I would meet her in the pantry during lunch breaks, in the elevator after work, and even on weekends when I worked late, I would always meet her at work. Until that night, she asked me to help her move. She said it was moving, but in fact it was just organizing the things in the house. She said she wanted me to know more about her habits so that she could cope with her family's questioning when she went home in the spring festival. Her home was much more cozy than I imagined. Although there were not many things, everything was neatly packed. On the bookshelf, besides business books, there were quite a few literary works and even some craft books. While packing up the bookshelf, a photo album suddenly fell down, and it was actually full of pictures of her when she participated in company activities. "The faucet has been broken for quite a while, and I haven't had time to find someone to fix it," she said, pointing to the dripping faucet in the kitchen. I casually grabbed my tools and fixed the problem in a couple of tries. "I didn't think you could fix a faucet." She handed me a glass of water with a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Just little things in life, get used to it." I smiled and took the glass of water, not realizing that her gaze lingered on me for a few more seconds. Later that evening, we finished cleaning up the room together. Looking at the refreshed house, her eyes lit up like a little girl who got a new toy. "Thank you, Haran." Her voice was especially soft when she said this, "Let me treat you to dinner." With that, we arrived at a quiet restaurant. It was a very moody little store with scented candles on the table and soft music playing. In such an atmosphere, she finally revealed her true purpose. It turned out that her family was not only urging her to fall in love, her parents even arranged a blind date. Not only that, there are several distant relatives, under the banner of concern, often introduce her to the object. In order to avoid these embarrassing scenes, she wanted to ask me to pretend to be her boyfriend and accompany her back home for the new year. I know this request is a bit much. She lowered her head and rubbed her fingers uneasily over her cup, but I really can't think of any other way. Looking at this usually thunderous strong woman in front of me, I suddenly felt a little heartbroken at the tired look she revealed at this moment. Perhaps because of the rare vulnerability she showed, or perhaps because of the sincerity in her eyes, I nodded my head furtively. Okay, I promise you. She jerked her head up and her eyes lit up. Really? Well, I wasn't planning on going home this year anyway, I said lightly. We began a series of trainings before returning home. She introduced me to her family members in detail, telling me about each person's personality traits and preferences. She even took me to buy a new set of clothes, saying that she wanted to leave a good impression on her family. My dad likes to play chess, do you know how? She asked me. A little, but at an average level. That's just as well, he'll be happy to lose a few games to him. She winked wryly. With that, we set off on the train back to her hometown. Along the way, she kept introducing me to her family, fearing that I would reveal my flaws in front of my family. My dad is a bit serious, but he's actually very nice. My mom is more enthusiastic and may ask questions. She droned on seriously. I couldn't help but smile at her nervous look. Don't worry, I'll pay attention. The train drove for 6 hours and finally reached its destination. On the platform, Lin Wanqing's parents had been waiting for a long time. As soon as Lin's mother saw us, she waved enthusiastically, while Lin's father stood beside her with a serious face. Wanqing, this is your boyfriend, huh? Lin's mother took my hand and looked me up and down, looks honest and reliable. When I arrived at the Lin family, my family's enthusiasm far exceeded my expectations. Lin's mother kept pouring food into my bowl, complimenting me several times that I looked honest and reliable. At the dinner table, she even took out Lin Wanqing's childhood photo album. Look, this is Wanqing when she was little, especially cute. Lin's mother flipped through the photo album with a happy smile on her face. I looked at the little girl in the photo with her crocheted hair, and then looked at the calm and capable woman beside me, and suddenly found it very interesting. Lin Wanqing seemed to notice my gaze and secretly glanced at me, her ears slightly red. After dinner, Lin's father pulled me into a game of chess. I followed Lin Wanqing's advice and lost the first 2 games to him. In the third game, I accidentally made a good move, and after thinking seriously for a long time, Lin's father actually gave me a thumbs up in the end. At night, because of the limited number of rooms, Lin's father arranged for us to stay in the same room. This made us all a little embarrassed, but it was hard to push back. You sleep on the bed, I'll just hit the floor. I took the initiative and said. No need, the bed is huge, one of us will be on one side. She said softly, a slight blush spreading across her face. Lying on the bed, we were both somewhat unable to sleep. She suddenly turned around and asked me in a whisper, how did you do today? Did it reveal itself? Don't worry, I think it was fine. Your parents were very welcoming. Yeah, I think so. She was silent for a while, and then said, thank you, Haren. And so we began this marvelous journey of pretending. During the day, we pretended to be a loving couple in front of our families, at night, lying in the same bed, but each keeping a safe distance. As we spent more time together, I realized that Lin Wanqing was a completely different person in private and at work. She would clumsily learn to make dumplings in the kitchen, smile innocently at the sight of her childhood toys, and even talk to me about her dreams and confusions in the dead of night. One morning, I woke up to find her watering the flowers on the balcony. In the morning light, she looked especially soft in her housecoat, with her hair tied back casually. Noticing my gaze, she turned her head and smiled at me, and at that moment, my heartbeat suddenly sped up. Gradually, I found myself looking forward more and more to seeing her every morning when I opened my eyes, to the cozy moments when I prepared breakfast with her, and to the nights when I lay in bed and listened to her whispering interesting things about her work and life. Finally, it was New Year's Eve. Early in the morning, Lin's mother opened up to prepare the ingredients for the New Year's Eve dinner. Lin Wanqing and I also joined in to help. Watching her earnestly wrapping the dumplings, I couldn't help but flick flour on her forehead. She pretended to glare at me in anger, but couldn't hide the smile at the corner of her mouth. The Lin family sat around wrapping dumplings and watching the Spring Festival Gala. The atmosphere was extraordinarily warm. While rolling out the dough, Lin's mother said with a smile, Wanqing, you and Haren are getting along so well, do you want to consider coming back next year with a marriage license? These words made my heart suddenly miss a beat. I peeked at Lin Wanqing and realized that her hand paused for a moment and her face flushed red. Come, you guys drink a cup of wine. Lin's father suddenly brought out a bottle of red wine and said with a smile. In the midst of her family's uproar, Lin Wanqing unexpectedly took the initiative to raise her wine glass. I froze for a moment, then picked up my wine glass as well. As our arms crossed and her warm breath gently brushed my face, I felt my heart beating so fast that it almost burst out of my chest. When I returned to my room at night, perhaps it was the effect of the alcohol, Lin Wanqing's face was flushed. She leaned on the edge of the bed, stared at me for a long time, and suddenly said, "Why don't? Let's do something practical." "You say what?" I looked at her in surprise. Before I finished my words, she leaned towards me and my heartbeat instantly accelerated and I didn't know how to react. But just then, she leaned steadily on my shoulder and whispered, "I seem to like you." These words sent a shock through my body. I looked down at her and realized that her eyes were clear and determined, or was she still half drunk? It turned out that she wasn't drunk at all, she was just using the strength of alcohol to say the words hidden in her heart. "Are you sure? It won't just be the influence of the environment?" I asked with some hesitation. After all, these few days together did tend to give people illusions. Lin Wanqing raised her head and looked at me seriously. "If it's the influence of the environment, then why did I already start caring about you before you agreed to pretend to be my boyfriend? Remember that day when I met you at the fast food restaurant? Actually, it wasn't a chance encounter, I know you eat there every day." Her words froze me. Thinking back to the bits and pieces of this period of time, I suddenly realized that my feelings for her had long transcended the relationship between ordinary colleagues. Those sneaky glances at each other, inadvertent touches, and long conversations in the dead of night, were all quietly changing the relationship between us. "In fact, I've noticed you for a long time," she continued. "You've always helped others quietly and never claimed credit. You pour water for the newcomers at every meeting, and when it rains and you see that the receptionist aunt doesn't have an umbrella, you'll take the initiative to lend it to her. These are small things that others may not even notice, but I see them all." I gently hugged her, feeling her body heat. "Then why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I was afraid." She buried her head in the crook of my shoulder, her voice trembling a little. "I was afraid I'd misunderstood, afraid I'd ruin the relationship I have now. It wasn't until I came home this time and saw how well you and my family got along that I was sure that I really liked you." Fireworks bloomed outside the window, lighting up the room. We smiled at each other and moved closer to each other in silence. Just at this cozy moment, Lin Mother's voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Wanqing, Haoran, come out to set off the fireworks." We smiled at each other and walked out of the room hand in hand. In the yard, Lin's father was fiddling with the fireworks, while Lin's mother was holding a camera, saying she wanted to take pictures of us. Under the gorgeous fireworks, we snuggled together, and at that moment, all the pretenses became real. Early the next morning, Lin's father called me to the study. I knew that this was the beginning of a test. The study was filled with books, and on the wall hung awards and photos from Lin father's youth. "Haoran, what are your plans for the future?" Lin father asked as he opened the door. His eyes gleamed as if he was trying to look into my heart. I took a deep breath and answered seriously, "Uncle, I know that I'm not good enough right now. But I will work hard to get better. I don't want to disappoint Wanqing, and I don't want you and Auntie to worry. Wanqing is a very good person, I will work hard to be worthy of her." Lin father looked at me for a long time in silence and suddenly said, "You know, Wanqing has been very strong since she was a child. She always pushed herself too hard and rarely opened her heart to people. This time when she came back, it's the first time I've seen her smile so happily." He stood up and walked over to the bookcase, taking out an old photo album. "This is Wanqing's photos from childhood to adulthood. You see, she rarely smiles so brightly. But in the past few days, I've noticed that she's changed, becoming more like an ordinary girl. This change is a good thing." Lin father's words warmed my heart. He patted my shoulder. "Work hard, Wanqing is not easy. I believe you can make her happy." After returning to the company, I began to work twice as hard. I arrived at the company early every day, carefully studied the market dynamics, and took the initiative to take over difficult projects. Lin Wanqing saw it in her eyes and often silently cheered me on. Sometimes when she worked late, she would bring me a snack and work overtime with me. We also experienced arguments and had disagreements over work. I remember one time, we argued over a project proposal. But in the end, we both calmed down, sat in the pantry and communicated well, and not only solved the problem, but also made the program better. This made me more sure that the relationship between us was real and deep. A year later, I got the promotion I had hoped for. At the company's annual meeting, when the general manager announced the news, the first thing I looked at was Lin Wanqing on the stage. She had tears in her eyes and her smile was brighter than ever. On the next New Year's Eve, we really returned to the Lin family with a marriage license. The yard was filled with red lanterns, Lin mother prepared a table full of dishes, and Lin father even broke the mold and drank a few glasses of white wine. Looking at our marriage certificate, Lin mother smiled gratefully and said, "At first I said, you a pair cannot be fake." Yes, starting from a fake theater, to a true confession, and then hand in hand for life. This is probably the best arrangement. Looking at Lin Wanqing beside me, I knew that this was not the influence of any circumstance, but the true intersection of our mutual hearts.